guys. So Lucia here from the Soul Tribe podcast, and I'm here with another book talk. And this time I'm going to talk about the book that's called The Terra Papers, and it's by Robert Morning Sky. And the interesting thing about this is, well, it's information that supposedly he got from his grandfather being a Native American. And so they had their supposed information inside of their tribe, and it was passed down to generations, and it made it to Robert Morning Sky, and he wanted to obviously share the information. So then the Terra Papers. Now I read the Terra Papers 1 and 2. I read both of them. So I jotted down actually quite a lot of information. Let's see how much I'm able to kind of read through and go through, because I have it here on my phone. But there's quite a few like events that he talks about that are really massive events that's really hard to kind of like speak about just like really quickly, but I tried to write it in a form where it was easier to do that. So let's see where I can start for it to be like neater, I guess you could say. What I understand is that, so we have King Anu, who many people would call Anunnaki. Some people will say that the Anunnaki are just, I think they just, some people believe, because they look into the information of like the clay tablets and all these other tablets, Sumerian tablets, I don't know what other tablets. And so they're supposedly saying that Anunnaki just really means alien. From the way that I understand it, from all the books that I've read, what I understand means Anunnaki is a specific like race. And when we're speaking about the Anunnaki, at least for this book, it seems like we're speaking about the Syrians. So a species from Syria. So we have the king who's Anu. Now you guys might have heard about Enlil and Enki. So Enlil and Enki supposedly are brothers. And these two brothers are the sons of King Anu. So King Anu had the rights to have, I guess you could say, his power over Earth, being the king of Syria, and them kind of coming here and planting seeds here and taking over kind of the area, the place, the planet. But of course, like all things galactic information, there's some sort of a war that goes on at some point, more than one in this case, what the book is talking about. But to go down it like more quickly and understand it a bit quicker, what I do understand is that Anu had a fight to get his, I guess you could say, his power back, because it was taken from him more than once. And so one of those was, I believe, was it his uncle? I didn't even write that part down. I think, don't quote me on this one, because this one I didn't jot it down, but I think in the beginning of the book, they talk about how it was his uncle, like his father's brother or something like that, that was trying to take over his position. And he accomplished it for a while. Anu managed to get it back. There's a lot of, like, if you read the book, you'll read a lot about queens and the reptilians, and the language that's used in this book, you have to like concentrate on like in the beginning to realize who they're talking about, because there's a lot of RRRs and SSS, and that's how like the races are divided in between like the reptilian or the Orions, the beings from Orion. And so we have what is Anu taking over the area, Anu losing the power, then Anu trying to get it back. He then then this kind of like rivalry begins between his two sons, Enlil and Enki. Enki being supposedly the older son. And I say supposedly because, I mean, it can't prove any of this, right? Like, we're talking about a book written of a story brought down from what it seems generations of Native Americans, given over to Robert Morning Sky, who then supposedly gives it over to us. So that's why I'm saying supposedly, right? I don't know there's no way of confirming this. And so then we have Enki and Enlil. Enki supposedly being the older brother has the right to the throne after his father. And since Anu didn't want to stay on a permanent basis on Earth, in this case, in the book, we're calling it Terra. That's what's called the Terra Papers. It's about Earth. Since he didn't want to stay here because he wanted to kind of keep control of his other areas and his throne and things, he sends one of his sons down. And then the rivalry between, is Enki going to have it? Is Enlil going to have it? And then them kind of one backstabbing the other. This goes on. So the book talks about that as well. From what, before I went into reading this book, I had heard about this book from another book that I was reading. And so I was like, oh, what is this? Because they quoted a lot of parts of this book. And I said, wait, what book is this? And so I totally had to look it up and read it because I found it really intriguing, the information. And when I heard about what source it was, I said, oh my gosh, this must be a really interesting story if it's coming from the Native Americans. So that's why I like jumped at the chance to read this book, both Terra Papers 1 and 2. And so the picture it paints is that Enki is ends up creating this like hybrid, because he works with genes. He's this word, I always mess it up, genetist. He's a genetist, and so he works with like these genes, and he can adapt them and make them into what he needs. And so the idea was they wanted to create, since the Anunnaki were complaining about all the hard labor, because the idea about Earth was they could get precious metals from here, especially gold. And I'd already heard that the Anunnaki loved gold, and it was a thing that they really needed for their kingdom. So that for me was a confirmation. So I was like, oh, interesting, they're talking about gold as well. Not the first time I've heard this. And then they talk about how they needed hard labor to get it. And so their own people, the Anunnaki, were obviously complaining because it was hard labor. And so the idea was, let's create a race that's going to do the dirty work for us. And so then they were going to create a hybrid, which ended up being the monkey, sort of say, I guess the ape, right? But what ended up happening is they ended up finding that there was two different kinds of ape. The ape that was just a slave, enslavement worker, but then the book says that Enki wanted to improve the ape and make it like more expandable in mind, in body, and consciousness, and things like that. It had its own ability to come out of the enslavement system and to grow. And so it created another kind of more improved version without telling his brother. And so this whole story about how he put them in an area where his brother possibly didn't know about. He taught them to fish, hunt. He taught them to hunt. He taught them to, like, you know, cook their own food. And this is supposedly the story, without Enlil, his brother, who was in power at the time, knowing about it. And so, and because Enlil was basically the one in power here on behalf of his father Anu, and Enki was the, you know, the son that was off somewhere else doing all these hybrid experiments and adaptations to help bring in a enslaved race that will do the dirty work for the Anunnaki. And it did work, of course, for a while, because the supposed ape just did what was commanded. But supposedly behind Enlil's back, this whole other version of the ape was created. And I mean, what I come to understand is something similar. I mean, when I go into the galactic information and what I teach with Cosmic U, what I understand is, and what I understood even before reading this book, was that there was the ape, like the ape was one of the prototypes that were created when the avatar body for Earth was created. But what I understood from the Melchizedek information was that the other prototype that was created came out more improved than the ape. Enki was not named like as a specific person that had to do with that, but when making the prototypes, it had more to do with our creator. But then the prototypes did come into play and had to be put down on Earth or into more material form. And that's supposedly the story of the Melchizedek, that the supposed Enki, the being that was Enki, was working directly with our creator. Whether he was conscious of it or not, I don't know. Whether, you know, this never showed up in the story. This is information that I personally have that is a lot of part of the teachings that I do with Cosmic Q. And so, and I mean, I'm making that story really short. The story is much bigger, but it has to do with our supposed universal creator, and it has to do with needing someone to do it from a more material form, because our creator is not a material form, and so it is in antimatter. And so when a being creates something in antimatter, it needs to be created in matter. And so it needs someone that's in a more dense form to be able to carry that out. It's almost like, you know, think about it like God working through someone, sort of say. And so I found that really interesting because we were hearing about these two different apes. And I said, well, that kind of corroborates the information that I know to be true, which is there was the ape that was created, but then there was another prototype that was created that was a much more improved version. I said, that really confirms it to me. And I thought that was like mind blowing. I really enjoyed that part. But again, you can't corroborate any of it, right? But this is where we are in the universe and in the world. We're kind of like, I guess, distant from all that, right? We can't fully connect with it. And the information we receive, we got to really just trust it. And so the story, I mean, goes on and on and on. And there's a lot of wars and a lot of things going on. So let me look at the notes. So, of course, when Enlil found out, he's mad because Enlil wants the whole of the apes community to be enslaved, and so the idea was to destroy them. And so he went on his way to create a cataclysm that was going to take all of those improved ape versions away, you know, take them out of the equation. And Enki, finding out that this was going to happen, what he basically ended up doing was being able to save some of them, not all of them, but some of them. And so that carried on. And Enlil ended up losing the power over Earth, and it ended up being taken over by Marduk. Marduk being the son of Enlil. Sorry, Marduk being the son of Enki. So Enki had a son, his name was Marduk, and apparently Marduk took over the throne of Earth, or the power of Earth, and he took it from Enlil. I've never actually really heard about that specific part outside of this book, like how that went on, but I had heard about Marduk and the power of Marduk. The really interesting thing that this book talks about is that Marduk went out of his way to eliminate any and all sacred information that would like prove or teach that there was some sort of other being in power at some point. So it's basically like, I'm going to destroy all of the history of the planet, so that the first thing that shows up to be important and to be in control and to be the king is me, Marduk. So then Marduk went out of his way to do that, but then he had to make sure that people started erasing or forgetting what they already knew, because yeah, you could destroy all the clay tablets, for example, you could destroy all the information that's recorded on Earth, but people at the time, they had it in their minds, they knew because they had lived through it all, right? And it was shared. So then a mind control program began, and if you ask me, that mind control program till this day is still used, but I think you can call it in different ways, whether that's religion, whether you want to call that the media, whether you want to call that new fear programs, whatever, but they're coming at us in all different angles, and they're all here to control our mind. So there is that. And if you go down that rabbit hole, you can read a bunch of books about that and how they've done that, and how it's coming from like way back then, and the Egyptian times, even before that, and all these things. But so Marduk was completely and utterly in power at that point. And then Marduk had to really depend on these beings that in the book was calling it the lizard beings. And the lizard beings, I'm looking for the word because there was another word that he used for the lizard beings. I don't know if I jotted it down. No, it doesn't say. Well, so what the lizard beings ended up doing was, knowing that they could take over very easily without even a war. That's what the book said happened. They ended up taking over the power over Marduk of Earth. And so I think that's where we all come into the whole information of, you know, we're controlled and manipulated by reptilians, the lizard people, right? And so the lizard people kept the idea of all this like one god exists that was supposedly Marduk, which the book says he called himself King Ra. So you'll hear a lot about like Ra in the Egyptian era, right? Like Ra, the son of God, or things like that. And so this book is kind of referring to almost like that was Marduk's kind of implementing that information into the planet as the history, and calling himself the king of everything and the one god. And so the lizard people, when supposedly they took over Earth, what they decided that they were going to continue to do was, let's roll with this one God scenario. It's really easy to control people this way. And so the one God thing carried on. And I mean, that's what you see in religions, right? There's one God, bow down to him, you're a sinner, and I don't know what else. I can't really say too much about religion because I personally never been a part of a religion and I wasn't brought up that way. So I can't really give too much feedback on that. But from what I understand, there's a lot about just honoring one God, right? No matter what religion. And there's so much information that like I wrote down. Let's see where I should go to next. Oh, there was this whole section about Moses showing up and what they called the IBRU people, which equals Hebrew. And so there's this whole section about Moses and the Ibru people. And then they talked about how like the separation of the waters was actually a ship, like a UFO ship that came down to help. That was the Sirians helping. And it was Moses in contact with Enlil because Enlil was trying to gain his like land back or his place back. Rome supposedly was established after that. So Rome was established and the lizard people wanted to ensure that mind control continued. And so the Roman Empire apparently took complete and utter control of everything. And it had a lot to do with the lizard people. And there's this weird thing it talks about the books. So I was like, I would need to look into this information more, but it was saying that chemicals and there was a lot of like wars in the skies at the time. So it had to do with like UFOs and other aliens. And they're saying that it was something that everybody was seeing, that it wasn't like hidden, right? And that there was a lot of that war going on and debris falling from the skies. And so it says like a lot of chemicals and bacterias fell from the skies because of these wars and these battles that were going on right above people's heads, sort of say. And that's when what the book was saying is when those things happened, there was a lot of plagues. So it's referring to the Black Plague breaking out in an era where there was a lot of that debris falling. It's saying 100 million people died in 400 years with plagues that began and that ended that can't be explained. So what basically the author's saying is that these plagues began because of the wars and the fighting and the debris falling from those battles, but also at the same time, it ended when that ended, like it just stopped. So there was like this weird, what's going on scenario. Like, how can you explain something starting out of nowhere and going full blown, taking over and like killing, a lot of people are dying from the plague and then it going away. So at this point, then the Earth isn't it. So the Earth as like a power structure was taken over by the reptilians. So everything was in control of the lizard people, aka the reptilians, or you can say the beings from Orion as well. It said, and so my notes here says the reptilians came and took over illegally the human race, and tried to stop the evolution. And it was like they just didn't want, of course, they wanted that old ape enslavement being that just I'm gonna listen to what you're telling me to do, kind of like that structure. And so apparently all of these beings took it over from a place where, like, you know, those that were living here on Earth at the time didn't vote any of these people into the power. There was no voting, there was no free will, which is a law here. And so then it was considered that the lizard people had taken over and were in control against the universal law. I 100% agree with this. I 100% agree with this, like this part of the book that's saying that. And so there needed to be like a stepping in universally to be like, put their foot down and say, no, wait. The people that live there, they did not vote you guys in. You guys should not even be in control. So there was almost like a protection or like action taken. And so the idea was the only way that they could come back in or get back into control was that we, or the beings, whoever the beings were at the time that were living on Earth, voted them back in or invited them back in. And that's when supposedly the whole scenario, and I've heard this story before as well, that's when supposedly the whole scenario of the Greys coming to Earth and convincing the US president to, in exchange for technology, you can come in, because it's like the sob story of the Greys saying our race can't reproduce anymore and we're becoming extinct. And how about we make a trade? We'll give you guys technology and you guys will give us we just need some like biological matter, aka like, you know, our genes and, you know, all the things you hear when you hear abduction stories. So the idea was that was the exchange. The book says that the president of the United States of America had a meeting with them and was iffy about it, but ended up approving and saying, okay, well, yeah. That's not the original story that I had heard. So I wrote down the story that the book tells and then the version that I had. The other version I had is that the president did not approve of this plan and was pretty worried, and it was Eisenhower, was pretty worried about like what would happen to humans and supposedly didn't agree to it. So this is the other version, not the book version, but the other version. And what I had heard in that version was that there was a group called the MJ-12 that was created to help control all the stuff that was going on that had to do with UFO and aliens, because we're talking about time where like the Roswell crash and all these things. And so there needed to be a group that supposedly helped investigate and keep the stuff under wraps. And I guess because they considered that humanity couldn't take that real information, so let's hide it and let's keep it to ourselves, I guess, sort of say. I'm assuming that part. So then the MJ-12 was created, and supposedly the MJ-12 in this version were the ones that did the treaty and approved the exchange technology for biological matter, and that Eisenhower supposedly did not know about it. Again, just to clarify, the book says that Eisenhower did. He ended up agreeing to it. He was iffy about it, but he ended up agreeing to it. So we don't know which version is true. To be honest with you, we don't know. But then that's when abductions came into play. So abductions came into play because supposedly they were going to grab biological matter. My perspective of abduction is, I don't think any of them that we've heard about, that those people that have those traumatic scenarios, I don't think any of them are good. Even if the person is convinced by the Grey that it's good, my personal perspective is that it's not good. And if it is an abduction, supposed abduction, that someone really considers as good, if you at some point are traumatized or in pain, I don't think that's a being that's a positive being. That's my perspective. I don't think that a being that vibrates really high in a place from like love and alignment, I don't think they will ever even try to harm you, or they'll do everything they can if they have to get biological matter from you. First, they're going to get you to agree, so your free will has to be present without being tricked, because it seems like a lot of these abductions, people are tricked. So you have to agree 100%, the free will has to be given. And I think that they would go about it a very different, untraumatic way. And it's funny because a lot of the stuff that they're saying in the book, you can even read similarities with the Dolores Cannon books, especially the one that like I did a book talk on. And so it was talking about how they did these, what do you call them? It's like, instead of them remembering, so the Greys had agreed, okay, we're not going to harm your people. And also we're going to make sure they don't remember, so it's not traumatic, because that was a supposed agreement. And so they would put smoke screens where like the person wouldn't remember the abduction, but they would remember something else. And I remember Dolores Cannon books where the person wasn't remembering the abduction, but when they went under hypnosis, they were remembering some weird event and moment where like an owl passed by in front of their car, for example. And they're like, wait, that's a bit odd, but then I'm missing 3-4 hours. And after that thing flew by me, and then they realized that was a smoke screen covering the real event. And so that's a corroboration with like Dolores Cannon information that they were the abduction scenarios with the Greys. They were actually doing that. They're putting smoke screen and hiding it behind one specific event that the conscious mind remembers, or in this case, subconscious, right, is remembering. But if you go deeper, or in hypnosis, Dolores Cannon was able to go past that, you would find that it wasn't an owl passing. It was the whole event being smoke screened by this one small thing of like a bird passing by or something. So I thought that was really interesting. But that was part of the agreement. We'll give you guys technology. You guys will give us biological matter, and we'll make sure that the humans are not hurt, and we'll make sure that the humans don't even remember, so they're not traumatized. I still think that free will is being broken there. And what like me as an individual human being incarnated on Earth with the right to have an opinion to this, because we all do, I think that who on Earth considers, because one president in the entire world, assuming that the president say yes, or not even, let's assume that whichever, either the president of the United States made the deal or the 12 individuals from MJ12 of one specific government in the world, even if it's one or the other, how is it that they have the right to speak and make an agreement on behalf of all of us? And I don't know at the time, like how many people on Earth, but like billions of people, 8 billion people right now. I don't think that one guy, even if he's at the time considered the most important president in the entire world, I don't care. I don't think that he can speak on behalf of me or anyone from my country, for example. So why would his treaty have to fall into my people, for example, or in my continent, South America? Like, I think that by making the agreement, how was that even universally? How did like the Galactic Confederation not come in and be like, you guys are still, because what happened here was, what you learned in the book is, what happened here was, and I've heard this more than once, so this isn't like the first time, and I agree with this part, is it's like you guys, we invited them back in to take control over us again. We're like, oh yeah, here's the here's the key to the kingdom again. You were kicked out once, but we're going to let you in. Here's the key. And so that seems to be what happened. And I agree. I do think that's what happened. And so then my thing is, I'm sorry, I didn't agree. And my president hadn't agreed. And no president in the whole of South America agreed. So how is it that one person or 12 people can make a treaty that affects a whole entire planet? Why didn't the Galactic Confederation realize that there was once again manipulation and a law being broken here? I don't agree with it. I don't agree that this is a way of them coming back in, that's permitted. I think that there should be, maybe the Galactic Confederation should have been like, no, 60% of, more than half, right? Like 60% of the population need to invite you in or agree for you to come in. I think that's how the universal law should have been more, I guess you could say, not controlled, but like more checked on. Like they should have checked on it more. So that's the part for me when I read the book. I'm like, it almost triggered and angered me. I'm like, no, that's not right. One dude, I don't care who that dude is. I don't care that dude's John Travolta. Like, I don't care I don't care if that dude is a president, John Travolta, or like someone else. Like, I don't care who he is. He doesn't speak on the behalf of more than half of like Earth. No, there's a lot of people here. We all have a vote. So you can see that triggered me a little bit. But anyways, because that affects everybody. And that still affects us. That's why it triggers me so much, because it still affects us. And we're still trying to gain back control from that. Or, recently, supposedly they were kind of kicked out again, right? Or we're in the process of gaining control back. But from my galactic information that I haven't gotten to in the courses in Cosmic U, but from my galactic information externally with the courses I've been creating, what I understand is that they're actually not permitted to have control over here anymore, because we're in a really important part of our evolution. But the Galactic Confederation or any of the races that want to help us, or even our galactic families, if they want to help us, they can't intervene, because the only individuals that are currently working with the reptilian or the lizard people, in this case, you want to call them, there are the people that are on Earth. So they're human beings, but they're being either controlled or manipulated, or they have some sort of really awesome agreement which they want to carry on. So call that a government, call that call that the media, call it whatever you want. But there's agreements behind closed doors with really important people that are working with these races, because these races don't have a foothold here anymore. So they're using specific or pivotal people. And so those people are either getting something positive from them, or because they're keeping their position of power, whatever it is. So it's almost like they're doing the dirty work for that race. So that race is still in control. They're just not doing it from Earth. So what I understand from my galactic information is that we're the ones that are supposed to stop it, because it's our job. And so the Galactic Confederation cannot come in and stop that for us, because it's a human to human thing. Even though someone's being influenced externally by another race, it's one human being to a whole population or a whole country or all of Earth, whatever it is. It's a human to human thing. And it's our job to evolve to a point where we're able to pick up on it, see it, understand it, and stop it. So that's my understanding of it. But that still triggers me, because they came back and they're able to create a whole lot of wars and a whole lot of havoc, and the control system and the financial control system, they're behind all of those things. So, I mean, this is just I've just talked a small part. Like I made it really tiny in the way I'm talking about it, but like it is a lot of information and there's a lot more backstory. So I'm just sharing. So if this is information that you're really interested in, or it piques your interest, I definitely recommend that you go read this book. Super interesting. The source is super interesting to me, at least. And like I said, there's parts that corroborate a lot of what I know. And I shared with you a part that didn't corroborate and the contradiction to that. And there was another section where I actually found a contradiction as well. Let's see what the other contradiction is. So it was the MJ12 thing with the president. Other version. Where's the other part? I wrote about the Doors canon book. Oh, the other version is, so the version of the book is that the Greys are actually the lizard people. And I agree to an extent that that's true, to me at least, from the information I'm able to understand and like vibrate with. I agree that that's true because it's almost one and the same. From my perspective and from other versions, what I agree with is that the Greys are the minions of the lizard people. So they're also sort of kind of like, if you can think about it, enslaved. They're working for the slaves of the lizard people. So you could say that they're the lizard people in that case, but I think that they as well are being controlled and manipulated by the lizard people. Whether they know it or not, I don't know that part. Whether they agree with it or not, I also don't know that part. And whether they were like convinced in a negative and bad way like we were, I don't know that part either. But I really believe that I personally would call the Greys the minions or the little tiny helpers of the reptilian beings, which is why my perspective of abductions from the Greys, I'm not talking about other races, but specifically about the abductions we've heard about to the Greys, for example, you've heard about like the Greys, what's it, that couple's name? Betty and Barney. If you ever heard the abduction story of like Betty and Barney Hill, I think their last name was Hill. That story for me vibrates with so many other stories of how it was traumatic and how it was painful and how it was disrespectful, if you ask me. And I don't think any of those people did it from a place of free will. They were kind of like obligated. And so they're working either with the reptilians, or they're hidden as the reptilians, or they're the minions of the reptilians. Whatever it is, I don't think it's good. That's my opinion. But anyways, I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Like if anybody's read the book, or if anybody's just watched this and has an opinion, or like, is there something that I didn't like pick up on that maybe you picked up on that I would love to hear? Like, leave comments. I want to really hear other people's opinions, because I think that if we all kind of get into it or dissect it, maybe there's new things that we can understand and learn. But super interesting. Definitely recommend it. And just to let you guys know again, this information came from me reading Terra Papers, book 1 and 2, because there's 2 of them. So that, and quick reminder, just to let you guys know that I have the Cosmic You courses where the idea is to teach people the whole universal information from the structure of the multiverse, the superverse, the multiverse, our universe, the system of like our creator, and our evolutionary human plan, and how we don't just have DNA, blood DNA here, but we also have cosmic DNA, the information you need to know about that, and who that connects you to, and what you're supposed to do with that. Depends on which class you're doing. So I'm dividing it into chunks of 1 class at a time, 1 video at a time, that lasts about an hour to like an hour, 15, 20 minutes. And it's a lot of information, which is why I'm dividing it into chunks of classes. And I currently have 3 videos out, Cosmic You, which is video 1, and then video 2 and video 3, each of them with their own titles. But once you get into video 1, then the next video, it's important for you to follow the order, because I'm not going to go back and reteach something I already taught. I'm assuming that you heard it and you understood it, and now I can carry on with like getting deeper into other aspects of it all. But the idea is to understand this, understand all of it. And I'm working with the information that's coming from the Pleiades. So it's information that's coming from supposedly a race that's helping us understand our evolutionary plan, that's helping us grow from that. And the goal is for us to understand how pivotal and important we are, and that we're not just this one little tiny speck of a person down here and that we have no control. My course is for us to like understand where we are inside of the big scheme of things, but understand also like understanding who we are, where we come from, and why maybe our soul is here, and the majority of souls are here. Re-empower ourselves and then take control back and go away, reptilians, and we're never inviting you back, treaty or no treaty, by a government official or not, I don't care. So I'll leave the link below so you can go and check out the Cosmic You course, video 1 and 2 and 3 with their individual titles. And quick reminder that I still read Akashic Records. So I'll leave my website below. You can go check out my website and see my prices. You can book a reading directly from the website, an Akashic Records reading. And yeah, I definitely want to hear everybody's opinion about the book, the information, and have you heard the stuff that I talked about before? And maybe there's a different version that you had heard about that I didn't. So let me know. Bye, guys.